Good evening, you're watching News Mongolian Beyond. I'm your host, Ulaanbaatar. And for top stories, Mongolia ranks 116th in political power for women. Prime Minister attends the 7th Eastern Economic Forum. And ARCASIA 21 Asian Architectural Forum held in Ulaanbaatar city. And for the news, stay tuned. Despite a comprehensive legal and institutional framework, there are many gaps in ensuring gender equality in Mongolia. The number of women in political decision-making positions is relatively low, with women making up only 17.1% of parliament membership. As of 2021, 50.9% of Mongolia's population and 52% of all voters were women. In 2020, Mongolia was ranked 79th out of 153 countries according to the World Economic Forum's annual Gender Gaps Index. However, it ranks 116th out of 156 countries in terms of women in political power, which is below the global and Asian average. According to a study of women's participation in decision-making conducted by the Social Policy and Development Research Institute, there is a high tendency for the Mongolian public to support women. The first conference of women parliamentarians was held this week. The conference recognized the importance of increasing the participation of women at the decision-making level, an objective outlined in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals through 2030 and Vision 2050, Mongolia's long-term development plan. We spoke with Ulaanbaatar, resident representative at UNDP Mongolia, about how Mongolia can improve gender equality.
Thank you very much. We at UNDP are working together with the Korean International Cooperation Agency to support women in decision-making in Mongolia. And as part of that, it's very important to ensure that there's a legislative framework that supports equality, gender equality in women's participation in decision-making. And as part of that, we promote very much that there should be a quota to allow to have sufficient minimum number, at least, of women in the parliament. Because right now, the current level is only 17%, which is quite below the global average of 26% and is below, of course, parity, which would be 50-50. So the quota should be in the legislation to ensure that political parties have to put a minimum 30%, better would be 40% of the candidates on the political party lists that are females, because right now the majority are men, so that when it goes to the elections and the seats are appointed in the parliament, that you ensure that you have a certain percentage of women in the parliament.
Working in cooperation with the Mongolian government, the UNDP is working to improve women's representation in the 2024 election through the UNDP-led and KOIKA-funded project promoting gender equality in public decision-making and women's empowerment in Mongolia. As of 2020, 17.1% of Mongolia's parliament, the nation's highest legislative body, are women, which is well below the global average of 24.9%. Additionally, only 27.1% of the citizen representative total members are women. Though Mongolia is ranked as a country with high gender development, according to UNDP's 2020 Human Development Report, the Gender Inequality Index is below the regional and global average.
The way that UNDP collaborates on implementing this recommendation is to provide best practice and international experience from other countries. And this quota system is, in other words, called a temporary special measure that's put into the legislation. And this is a measure which is also endorsed by the Convention on All Forms of Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, which is an international human rights treaty which Mongolia has signed on to. So they're legally binding to implement the commitments of the CEDAW treaty, and the CEDAW treaty encourages countries to use temporary special measures or a quota system to allow for a higher number of women to be elected, to basically guarantee that there's a certain percentage of women being elected.
On April 19th, Korean International Cooperation Agency and the United Nations Development Program in Mongolia signed an agreement on the Promoting Gender Equality in Decision-Making in Mongolia project, which will be implemented over the next 4 years, with $4.8 million in funding from the government of the Republic of Korea and $0.3 million from the UNDP, as well as $0.9 million in additional funding from KOIKA for project monitoring and evaluation. Prime Minister of Mongolia Oyrton Lofsonamsar attended the 7th Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, Russia. During a public speech, he introduced Mongolia's upcoming mega projects under the new revival policy.
During the forum, Prime Minister Oyrton met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The two sides discussed enhancing ongoing mega projects, including railway, mining, and hydroelectric power plants, with a focus on the Ig River hydroelectric power plant.
Foreign Ministry Sergei Lavrov visited Mongolia. We discussed the current geopolitical situation and the political atmosphere in Mongolia. I hope you have been informed about that, and we are hopeful that we can make a deal on the gas pipeline through upcoming meetings.
President Putin expressed support for the gas pipeline projects from Russia to China. He also highlighted the possibility of effective energy cooperation.
Mega projects have been successfully implemented between the two countries. Russia supports the gas pipeline project stretching from Russia to China. Both sides also successfully made a deal on petroleum product distribution.
The 100th anniversary of the Russian and Mongolian diplomatic relationship was celebrated in 2021. The two sides expressed their hope for more fruitful cooperation in the coming century. The Eastern Economic Forum took place in Vladivostok from September 5th to 8th.
The ARCASIA 21 Asian Architectural Forum was held in Ulaanbaatar city from September 4th to 9th. Architects and experts from 10 countries gathered to share their expertise on urban development.
The Ministry of Construction and Urban Development, the Ministry of Culture, and the Union of Mongolian Architects organized the forum. Ulaanbaatar occupies 0.3% of Mongolian territory, but 50% of the Mongolian population lives in the city. To reduce population density, the government decided to establish a satellite city in Hushuk Valley. Many skilled architects from Mongolia and overseas are in high demand for this new city project.
Establishing a brand new city requires a general development plan. The decision was made to first fully build the underground engineering infrastructure. Government organizations will gradually be moved to the new residential area. We are sure that mega projects such as the International Airport, Bogtan Railway, and Free Economic Zone will magnetize investment into the upcoming city in Hushuk Valley.
As part of the forum, the Future Sustainable Urban Planning exhibition opened to showcase Mongolian architecture. Mongolian officials presented plans for building a city following the completion of the new international airport in Hushuk Valley.
In the end, intellect, skills and creativity are the core of building a new city. In that sense, sustainable urban planning is crucial at the moment.
International research shows that Asia is currently home to 59% of the world's population. 50% of these 4.7 billion people live in urban areas. High population density has been an issue in many Asian countries. International experts suggest that correct planning is the basis of creating a sustainable city.
Ulaanbaatar city isn't as highly developed as Tokyo or Seoul. However, the city is developing rapidly, and I believe high-tech must be used for city development. For instance, artificial intelligence could be used to regulate traffic.
Mongolia has the advantage of vast land. Urban planning must be done correctly while using this advantage. It's also important to infuse national characteristics when building a city. Architects must consider the infrastructure, roads, public areas, and public transport. More than 150 architects and experts from 22 Asian countries participated in the conference. The participants highlighted the importance of using advanced technology in architecture, increasing investment, and learning from foreign experiences when building a new city. ARCASIA is a biennial forum that has been held in Mongolia twice.
Thank you for staying with us. Now let's take a look at the currency exchange rates provided by Mongol Bank. A high number of rotavirus cases was detected among children in Nakhon province. Rotavirus is a highly contagious infection, most common in children under 5 years old.
The Orkhon Province Regional Diagnostic and Analysis Center has reported 40 to 50 daily cases of rotavirus infection in children. Over the weekend, they received over 150 patients. The main symptoms of rotavirus are severe diarrhea and vomiting. The virus alters the function of the small intestinal epithelium, resulting in diarrhea. When these symptoms arise, parents are advised to isolate the child at home to prevent the spread of infection. Rotavirus infection spreads quickly when the new school year starts. To improve their child's immunity, parents often turn to medicine. However, they're advised to take basic preventive measures instead, including wearing proper seasonal clothing, eating nutritious food, and getting sufficient sleep. A calm family environment also boosts a child's immune system.
Now let's take a look at our international news from our partner agencies. Queen Elizabeth II, Britain's longest reigning monarch and a symbol of stability across much of a turbulent century, died Thursday after 70 years on the throne. She was 96. Buckingham Palace said she died at Balmoral Castle, her summer residence in Scotland, where members of the royal family had rushed to her side after her health took a turn for the worse. A link to the almost vanished generation that fought World War II, she was the only monarch most Britons have ever known. Her 73-year-old son, Prince Charles, automatically became king and will be known as King Charles III, his office announced. Charles' second wife, Camilla, will be known as the Queen Consort. The impact of her loss will be huge and unpredictable, both for the nation and for the monarchy and institution she helped stabilize and modernize across decades of enormous social change and family scandals. Charles called the death of his mother a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family, adding, "I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world." British Prime Minister Liz Truss, appointed by the Queen just 48 hours earlier, pronounced the country devastated and called Elizabeth the rock on which modern Britain was built. Since February 6, 1952, Elizabeth reigned over a Britain that rebuilt from a ruinous war and lost its empire, joined the European Union and then left it, and made the painful transition into the 21st century. She endured through 15 prime ministers, from Winston Churchill to Truss, a fixed point and a reassuring presence even for those who ignored or loathed the monarchy. She became less visible in her final years as age and frailty curtailed public appearances, and she used a cane after the April 2021 death of Philip, her husband of 73 years. She was hospitalized for a night for tests later that year. Elizabeth Alexander Mary Windsor was born in London on April 21, 1926, the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York. The US has approved nearly $2.7 billion in new aid for Ukraine and allies, including $675 million in weapons for Ukraine as it battles Russia. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin announced the arms packages at a meeting with dozens of fellow ministers at the US Air Base in Ramstein, Germany. The aid includes howitzers, munitions, Humvee vehicles, armored ambulances, and anti-tank systems. The US has already pledged about $13 billion in military aid for Ukraine. The Biden administration said on Thursday it has earmarked $2 billion in a long-term assistance in the form of investments to bolster the security of Ukraine and 18 of its neighbors, including both NATO members and non-members at risk of future Russian aggression. It said it would notify Congress of the aid plan. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, as his colleague urged Ukraine's allies to commit to supporting the country for as long as necessary and be prepared to adapt the type of support offered. In Kiev, Mr. Blinken said that the aid would be delivered at a pivotal moment during the war, with Ukrainian operations against Russian forces proving effective. He also vowed that the US and its allies would continue to exert that pressure until the aggression ceases and Ukraine is fully sovereign and independent.
This is my fifth trip here as Secretary, the third since the Russian aggression started. And I thought, and President Biden thought it would be particularly meaningful to come at this time as Ukraine is starting this counteroffensive in the south, also in the east. Early days, but we're seeing real effectiveness on the ground, and we're proud of the fact that our support, the support of so many other countries, is helping to enable what the Ukrainians are doing and working to liberate territory seized by Russia in this aggression. At the end of the day, what matters most and the thing that fundamentally makes the difference is that this is Ukraine's homeland, not Russia.
President Joe Biden wants to end America's forever wars, but he's pumping billions of dollars into one that could grind on for a long time. After 6 months, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is entering a challenging new phase. Europe is facing a hard winter of high prices and fuel shortages because of the fallout from sanctions against Moscow and President Vladimir Putin's suspension of Russian gas supplies. Now let's take a look at our regular feature on sports.
A moment of silence was held for Queen Elizabeth II at SoFi Stadium on Thursday night, ahead of the NFL's season opening game between the defending Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams and the Buffalo Bills. The Queen, Britain's longest reigning monarch and a symbol of stability in a turbulent era that saw the decline of the British Empire and disarray in her own family, died Thursday after 70 years on the throne. She was 96. The palace announced she died at Balmoral Castle, her summer residence in Scotland, where members of the royal family had rushed to her side after her health took a turn for the worse. The press conference ahead of UFC 279 was aborted early on Thursday after an untold incident occurred backstage. Nate Diaz and Khamzat Chimaev were due to speak but never made it. UFC President Dana White initially explained fighters would come out to answer questions bout by bout and then brought out undercard fighters Kevin Holland and Daniel Rodriguez. After a few comments, they squared off and exited. Li Jinlian was then about to step on the stage but was quickly guided out. After speaking to an employee of microphone, White apologized to the crowd and ended the press conference. The Diaz is coming off 3 straight losses, the last being an unanimous decision to Leon Edwards in June 2021. Chimaev and Russian-born Swede beat Gilbert Burns at UFC 273 back in April. Prior to that, he defeated Lee, who is set to take on Tony Ferguson on the undercard Saturday. Max Verstappen believes that communication within Red Bull is working well at the moment, ahead of the F1 Championship leaders' bid for a 5th successive race win at this weekend's Italian Grand Prix. The Dutchman made it 4 successive victories in the previous round on home soil, leaving closest title rival Charles Leclerc of Ferrari 109 points off the pace at the top of the championship standings with 7 rounds remaining. Verstappen has yet to win an F1 race at Monza, but Lewis Hamilton will be targeting his 6th victory at the Northern Italian circuit, which would also be his first of the current season.
And I thought something different.
Here's the weather forecast of world's major cities. Well, that's all for today, and thank you for staying with us. We'll see you next week with more news and updates. Have a nice weekend. Goodbye.